So the Barrie Colts ready to play their fifth opponent from the Western Conference already, and that means the Soo Greyhounds making their one and only trip to the Sadlin Arena this season. So today we're going to talk with Brad Coccimiglio. He's the writer with Soo Today. We caught up with Brad in the second half last year, and I figured it was so much fun we'd bring Brad back again. For me, I felt like the summer went by too quick. Is it the same for you?
Yeah, it was definitely a quick summer, but nice to be back. Nice to be back in hockey mode and kind of get things rolling here for sure.
And the Soo Greyhounds, one of the busier teams in the Ontario Hockey League, already 5 games down and getting ready for another road trip, a stop in Barrie this weekend. For this team, are the expectations pretty high from what you're hearing from the fans up in the Soo?
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that, I think the expectations are a little on the higher side. It was a tough year last year. I mean, they did wind up getting into the playoffs. It was, a tight finish at the end for them in a lot of ways. And, a big group back from last year. I mean, they essentially, the only guys that weren't eligible to come back were three OAs, and Newell Nord was obviously a big part of that team last year as an import turning pro. But this is a group that right now they've got everybody except for Brady Martin back. He's going to get his long look with Nashville. So that's going to be kind of an interesting go here over the next 6, 8 weeks, to see what Nashville ends up deciding to do with him. But yeah, this is a roster that's got a decent amount of experience. There's some interesting talent on this team. They had two first rounders out of the draft over the summer, which both guys have shown. Noah Laus has shown some flashes. Ryan Kaczynski's shown some flashes. They're kind of battling a little bit of an illness slash injury bug at this point with a couple of defensemen that were probably going to play bigger roles for them out of the lineup, and Brody McConnell Barker and Callum Croskery. McConnell Barker's out with an illness, and Croskery's out. They're saying month to month right now with all they're saying is an upper body injury. Good news is he is skating. He is able to do a little bit on the ice, so that'll be good for him when he gets back. But yeah, I mean, I think high expectations for this team. Goaltending is going to be interesting with this group. As I think it is with a lot of teams around the league. But this is a team that I think there's some possibilities to be excited about for this group.
And there's nothing wrong with a little adversity early in the regular season, although I'm sure for the Greyhounds, it'd be nice to have Brady Martin back, although he's looked pretty comfortable playing with that Nashville Predators team so far during the preseason.
Yeah, you know what? He's looked great. I saw something, I think it was earlier this morning, that they've kind of got him still penciled in on a line with Ryan O'Reilly, and that's a good spot for him. Like I've been a big Ryan O'Reilly guy since he was in the OHL. So like for Brady Martin, that's a good spot for him to be in, especially with O'Reilly's style. I think Ryan O'Reilly plays. In some ways plays a little bit of a similar game to Brady Martin. So I think that's a almost a perfect guy for Brady Martin to learn from. If I'm the Greyhounds in that situation, that's an interesting spot, right? It's Nashville seems like they've got maybe one or two forward spots open potentially here going forward, and a little bit of a log there, as far as guys kind of competing for that last spot. But Brady Martin's one of those guys that, physically, he's probably about as close to ready, for the NHL as you could be at 18 years old. I mean, that's still a massive jump. And, skill wise, he's a wild player to watch. Seeing some of the stuff he did on that team last year was impressive, especially in a team that struggled at times. So he's a guy that, he's going to get that long look in Nashville. It's well deserved. He's earned that opportunity. And, if you're the Greyhounds, you're holding out hope that he's going to end up coming back. And I wouldn't be shocked if Nashville sent him back at I think a lot of guys at 18 years old, it probably wouldn't hurt to have them go back and and have a real high end year at the major junior level. But at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the Nashville Predators to decide whether or not Brady Martin's gonna finish the year as a Soo Greyhound or as a Nashville Predator.
And one player right now who's kind of benefiting from this extra ice time is Jordan Chiron. He's come out flying right off the hop, leading this team in scoring. Are you a little surprised with this jump that he's shown in these first 5 games?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I mean, if you had told me he was going to be among the league leaders in goals and points, through the first 2 weekends of the regular season, I probably wouldn't have expected it. But like you said, he's made the most of an opportunity. He was a guy that I think this team was going to rely on a lot this year. You saw bits and pieces of him being potentially a pretty good OHL player. You saw bits and pieces of that last year. And again, he's a guy that brings a lot to the table. I think we're seeing that skill element now that maybe we didn't necessarily see consistently last year. And he's a guy who's very physical. He's not afraid to get into a scrum. He's a strong kid. And I think that's maybe something that the Greyhounds have lacked in previous years was maybe a guy who could do both. And it's sometimes it's tough to find a guy that can come in and give you that strength element, but also that skill element as well. And I think we're seeing a lot more out of that of Jordan here early on. And do I expect him to keep this run going here? I mean, ultimately it's going to be up to the kid, right? I mean, it's going to be fun to see if he can keep this run going. I mean, we've seen a lot of guys in junior have these real great short stretches, and the tough thing is for these guys is to be able to find that consistency and keep it going. And as long as he's getting the opportunity and trying to make the most of it, I think he's going to be a big part of any success this Greyhound team has this year.
And one player that a lot of people are going to be keeping a close watch on is Chase Reed, with being projected to be a high NHL draft pick in 2026. Can you talk a bit about Reed and what he brings to this Greyhounds team?
Yeah, Chase Reed's been he's been absolutely wild. To be honest, I mean, there's no way I expected him to come in last year and have the impact that he did. He was a point a game guy coming in, and I believe it was in early December last year. Prior to the Chris, well prior to the Christmas break, and the kid came in and put up numbers right from the start. He skates well, moves the puck well. He's a good sized body. A lot of fun to watch, and he's earned every accolade he's gotten here to this point as a Sioux Greyhound, and he's going to be a lot of fun to watch here going forward. And once this blue line gets healthy, I mean, it's going to make that group interesting, right? I mean, you add McConnell Barker to the mix and you add Callum Croskery to the mix, once they get back from, their illness and injury. I mean, it's going to make life interesting for them because they're going to have some decisions to make. But, I think as far as a lot of people are concerned, Chase Reed's, going to be the guy that makes this blue line really work. And, again, a kid who's been an absolute treat to watch. And, you see it on a nightly basis. He always seems to be doing something that catches your eye. He always seems to make whether it's a nifty little pass or he gets a point shot through some traffic. He's obviously a key member of the power play this year. He's been an absolute treat to watch, and he's probably going to make some NHL team very happy come next summer.
And with the all the rule changes with the NCAA situation, teams have been a little more competitive after signing free agents out of the United States. And one player that really intrigued me was the signing of Quinn McKenzie. He's basically been a
Yeah.
winner everywhere he goes, and now joining this Greyhounds team that has high expectations for the season. I know that he doesn't have a goal yet since the start of the regular season, but he seems like a very fascinating element for the offense.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, he's a kid that, like you said, stepped in as a free agent invite to training camp. He's a Penn State commit. And like you said, you touched on the fact that, he's interesting because he hasn't scored a goal yet, but he's done so many things well. And again, John Dean's talked about him, a few times just generally with, with us as reporters here in the Sioux, and talked about him as a kid who, once he gets things rolling, is, that stuff that the numbers are going to come for him. We saw it last weekend, on the road. He scores a shootout winner on a nice little move. And, it was funny. We talked to him after the game, and, he was kind of making light of the fact that it was one of those things where he didn't know he was going to make that move going in. And then, saw what guys were doing beforehand, and said, hey, like this, this might work. And just shifted a little bit to what he saw other guys doing in the shootout, and next thing you know, he's got the shootout winner in that game. And and on a great move, a highlight reel shootout winner. So he's a kid who's got a lot of skill. It's funny, some of the comparison with him has been to a previous Soo Greyhound who just left the organization, and Justin Cloutier. And funny enough, wearing Justin Cloutier's old number with the Greyhounds as well. And again, he, for fans around the league, Quinn McKenzie's got a little bit of Justin Cloutier in him. High energy. I I would say he's probably a little more skilled than Justin Cloutier. That's no disrespect to Justin Cloutier, who put up good numbers in the O. And I think Quinn McKenzie's going to be again, talk about guys who are going to be a big part to this team. He stepped in as a free agent, and he's already playing a top six role on a team that has some high expectations this year. So, he's obviously been a real good fit here early on. And it's going to be fun to see what he does once he finally gets those numbers rolling. I'm interested to see what he's going to end up with here in the league.
Now, you touched on it earlier. Goaltending was a bit of a question mark coming into this season. And I know on social media during the preseason, there were some fans who were wondering, well, is Landon Miller ready to be the starter? But I've been now seeing those same people now saying, hey, it's Miller time with all these great saves that he's been doing in this season. So
Yeah.
do you find that, Miller's ready to take that next step in the crease?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I'm the first to admit, when the OHL reached out to guys around the league, and, had them talking about the teams in their respective markets, I'll be the first to admit I was a guy who, said the Greyhounds goaltending was probably going to be their biggest question mark. And, I'll straight up, Landon Miller early on this season is making me eat crow. First to admit that. I mean, he was great in Peterborough last weekend. The Ottawa game, that was a tough game. He got hung out to dry a lot in that game on Sunday afternoon in Ottawa. But he's been great here early on in the regular season. And for him, if he keeps that consistency, he's going to be a guy that's going to be a good piece. And I mean, that I feel like that's always been his thing, right? Is when Landon Miller's good, he can be very good. There's no question about it. We've seen it this year. We saw it sometimes last year. And even in his rookie year, there were times where he looked outstanding, and he was a highly drafted goaltender in this league for a reason. So, if he finds that consistency and he keeps this start going, then he's gonna make everyone that questioned him look bad. But that's, hey, you know what? That's you enjoy seeing that out of a kid. I get a kick out of seeing these kids come in where you question them on something. And not necessarily that Landon Miller's using a I'm going to show you type of attitude, but Landon Miller quietly has gone out there and really played well here early on. So he's certainly he's using it maybe as a little bit of motivation that people were questioning it early on. So it's going to be fun to see fun to see how he carries this going forward for sure.
And coming into this season, people were already talking about the Kitchener Rangers, the Windsor Spitfires being two of the best teams right now in the Western Conference. But from your perspective, do you see the Greyhounds maybe sending a message that they should be considered one of those top teams? And does Kyle Raftis go out and maybe add a little bit here before we get to the OHL trade deadline?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, this is like you said, this is an interesting group. I mean, this is again, you've got the Windsors and the Kitcheners who are already showing signs of being being two of the league's best. And from what I've seen from this group, it's a team that I wouldn't be shocked if this team, is battling for a home ice spot in the playoffs. I feel like they're a team that could give, some of these good teams a run. They've got some games against Windsor coming up, which will obviously be the big test. One of the big tests for them. They've got a game against Kitchener coming up in the next little bit as well, and we'll get a really good idea of where this team is at right now. Through those games, obviously, but. The great thing is they've got some spots open. As much as they've got a big group, they've got some spots open. They've got two overage spots that they could fill at this point. Marco Mignos is the only overage player on the roster right now, and they have an import player spot open at this point too. That if their first round import doesn't decide to come over at any point this year, I mean, maybe Kyle Raftis decides to go out and maybe shop for an import player as well. So, this team could be very interesting going forward. And the interesting fact with that is if Kyle Raftis decides to add at the deadline, if you're adding two, let's say two relatively high end overage players rather, it's probably going to cost you less than going out and getting, that big name player at the trade deadline where you look at them dealing, Andrew Gibson last year. Andrew Gibson is a 19-year-old. If you're adding Andrew Gibson as an overage last year, that package is probably very, very, very different. So, again, they've got some options here going forward, and to be curious to see what Kyle Raftis decides to do with it. And like I said, they've got some games coming up here that'll probably tell them a little bit about where this roster really is, but again, this seems like a team that's going to be fun to watch this year and is going to be, you know, probably in the top four in the West, give or take, and could be interesting come playoff time, depending on what they decide to do at the deadline for sure.
Oh, the Soo Greyhounds definitely looking like a very interesting team in the Western Conference. And Brad, just want to say thanks for coming on here and all the best.
Hey, always a pleasure jumping on. Thanks for having me. Anytime you need me, I'm always here.
So that's Brad Coccimiglio with Soo today as the Greyhounds. Such a fascinating team and a team that many have predicted will finish probably top four in the Western Conference standings. But it's still early and we'll have to wait and see how things all pan out. But still, with the likes of Brady Martin, if he could come back, that'll be a huge boost for this Greyhounds team as they make their way through the 25-26 season. So again, thank you very much for all your support. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and we'll talk to you again soon.